The very first scene of this entire series is not about its protagonist. It is about a boy who will not stand up. A bus on the way to the school, an elderly woman standing, a priority seat occupied, and a bright, warm, universally likable girl asking, politely and then less politely, whether the young man sitting in it might consider moving. He does not move, he does not get angry either, and he does not tell her to go away. What he does is considerably stranger. He engages with her, elaborately and courteously in the register of a gentleman at a garden party, and declines. He is enjoying himself. The elderly woman is still standing. The bus is still watching. And it goes on long enough to become genuinely uncomfortable, until somebody else, some student we never really meet, gives up their own seat and quietly ends the whole thing. That is how we are introduced to Rokusuke Koenji. Before we know anything about the school, before we know what the points are, before the boy at the back of the bus has said a word to anyone. And it is not an accident that he goes first, because that 30 seconds contains everything you need to understand him, and most people watching it will file him as comic relief and not think about him again for 3 seasons. Tonight we are going to think about him. He is a tall young man, a little over 180 centimeters, well built in a way the story keeps drawing attention to, with straight blonde hair down to his shoulders and dark reddish eyes. He was born on the 3rd of April. He is 17, and he moves through a school full of extremely tense, extremely frightened teenagers with the serene, unbothered air of a man on holiday who has found a particularly good deck chair. Before we go further, it is worth understanding what kind of place he has been dropped into, because his behavior only becomes remarkable once you know what everybody else is dealing with. This school is run by the Japanese government, and it exists to produce graduates who will support the country. It reports 100% employment and university placement rate, which is the promise that gets 400 children through the gate every spring. The campus is enormous, something like 600,000 square meters, and once you are inside it, you stay inside it. Students live on site. They are not permitted to leave except on specific occasions. And they are forbidden from contacting anybody on the outside at all, including their own families. Inside that sealed world, everything runs on points. Each class holds a pool of class points, and every month each student receives private points equal to 100 times that figure. Those private points are money. They buy food, clothes, anything within reason, and class points are the actual scoreboard because the letters are not fixed. Class A through D are provisional labels that get reassigned according to the standings, so the class holding the most points is called A, and the rest fall in behind it. Which means every student in that building wakes up every day inside a live ranking, with their spending money attached to their performance, unable to call home, and with their entire future riding on where they finish. That is the pressure everyone else is under. And here is the number that tells you what Koenji thinks of it. His recorded private point balance is 52. 52, not 52,000. In a school where students hoard points obsessively, where classes strategize for months over hundreds of thousands, where the price of transferring into whichever class you like is 20 million and people genuinely try to save it, Rokusuke Koenji is carrying about enough to buy lunch. He is not poor, that is the joke. He is possibly the wealthiest student in the year. He simply does not keep any, because he does not need to keep any, because if he ever wanted some his family would provide it, and so the entire currency, the school has built its control system around registers with him as a mild administrative curiosity. Comes from a well-known family of scholars, not merely wealthy, though they are that too. Scholars with a name that people recognize and a company, and Rokusuke is listed as its future president, which means that unlike almost everybody else in that building, he has somewhere to go afterwards regardless of what happens here. The school's entire promise, the thing it holds over 400 children for 3 years, is that graduating from the top class guarantees your future. He already has one. There is a tension in that which the story never draws attention to, and which I think is worth noticing. This school cuts its students off from the outside completely, no leaving the campus, no contact with anybody beyond the gate, including parents, including guardians. That isolation is not incidental, it is one of the load-bearing walls of the whole design. It is what makes the points matter. If a frightened 16-year-old could telephone home for help, or for money, or simply for reassurance, half of the pressure the institution applies would leak straight out of the building. And yet the one thing everybody understands about Rokusuke Koenji is that his family will cover him. The story does not explain the mechanism, and I am not going to invent one. What is stated is simply that he does not worry about points because his family can provide them. Somehow, across a wall that is supposed to be absolute, the Koenji money is understood by everybody, including him, to still be reachable. which means that whatever isolation the rest of them are living under, he is not quite living under the same one. Everybody else is sealed in. He is, at minimum, sealed in with a line still attached to the outside. I do not think that is a plot hole so much as the point. The school's entire pressure system assumes a student with nowhere else to go. He has somewhere else to go, and so the pressure that shapes every other person in this story simply passes through him. And so we arrive at the question that makes him worth an hour of anyone's evening. He is in Class D. Now, if you have watched even a little of this show, you know what Class D means. It is not the class for people who scored badly. The school is quite specific about this. Class D is where they put students with defective traits, some flaw of character serious enough that, whatever their raw ability, the institution has decided they cannot yet be trusted with the top. So the question is what they saw in Rokusuke Koenji. And the answer, stated plainly in the material, is two things: an egotistical nature and an inability to work with others. Read that second one again, because it is doing more work than it looks like, not an incapacity, an inability that reads on every piece of evidence we ever get as a refusal. The school did not decide he was weak. It decided he would not cooperate, and it filed him accordingly, and it turned out to be completely right. Let us talk about how he speaks, because it tells you a great deal. He almost never uses anyone's name. He gives people titles instead, decided on first sight, and then uses them permanently regardless of how the relationship develops or whether the person objects. Kushida, the girl from the bus, is pretty girl. Sudo, the tall red-headed basketball player with the temper, is red hair. Sakai Yanagi, the leader of Class A girl with a genuinely formidable mind and a cane, is little girl. Ryuan, who runs an entire class through fear and violence, is Dragon Boy and sometimes Mr. Naughty. And the protagonist of this entire series, the boy raised in a laboratory to be capable of anything, is Elevator Boy. Sit with that one for a moment. Everyone else in this story spends 2 years trying to work out who Ayanokoji really is. Teachers investigate him. Class leaders build campaigns around him. A man is sent by his own father to remove him from the school. And Koenji met him once near a lift and decided that was sufficient, and has called him Elevator Boy ever since with no apparent intention of ever updating it. It would be easy to read that as stupidity. It is not. It is a refusal to grant anybody the status of being worth categorizing properly, and it is completely consistent, and it never wavers no matter who he is talking to or what they could do to him. And look at the shape of the names themselves, because they are not random. Every one of them is a single physical or superficial fact. Hair color, being pretty, being small, a location. Not one of them refers to anything the person has done or is capable of or wants. Which is, when you think about it, precisely the opposite of what everybody else in this building spends their time doing. This entire school is an engine for sorting people by capability. Every student in it is constantly assessing every other student, updating, ranking, working out who is dangerous. It is exhausting, and it never stops, and it is the water they all swim in. Koenji looked at each of them once, noticed one surface detail, and closed the file. There is a name for what that is, and it is not laziness. It is the most economical possible insult, delivered permanently to everyone at once. He has decided in advance that nobody in this school will turn out to be worth the effort of properly knowing, and he has been proved wrong exactly 0 times as far as he is concerned, because he does not update. His own name, incidentally, has a small joke buried in it. Rokusuke is written with characters meaning 6 and assistants. Koenji is temple, circle, temple. The most self-sufficient person in the story is carrying the word for help around in his given name. It is worth putting his defect next to the others, because Class D is a collection of them, and the school was not being arbitrary. Sudo's defect is his temper, and it nearly gets him expelled twice. Ike's is that he does not work. Yamauji's is vanity of a needier, more brittle kind than Koenji's, and it eventually destroys him. Kushida's is buried so deep that it takes an entire season to surface. Horikita's is that she is contemptuous of other people and cannot ask for help. Ayanokoji's, according to his own homeroom teacher, is that he deliberately conceals what he can do, which she considers the most defective trait in the room. Every one of those is a flaw that hurts its owner. That is what makes them flaws. Sudo suffers for his temper. Horikita suffers badly for her coldness. Yamauji is destroyed by his. Koenji's costs him nothing. That is the anomaly, and I do not think the school anticipated it. They built a diagnostic system that identifies the thing standing between you and your potential, on the assumption that being shown it will make you want to fix it. And they ran that system on a boy who agreed with the diagnosis, found it unobjectionable, and went back to what he was doing. The self-regard is the other thing everybody notices, and it is genuinely spectacular. On the cruise ship in front of a substantial number of his classmates, he compliments his own reflection in a mirror, repeatedly, not once as a joke, repeatedly as an activity, and later when he needs drying off he declines to do it on the stated grounds that toweling oneself is menial work and beneath a person of his quality. The students watching do not find this charming. The material says plainly that they scorned him for it openly, and he registered none of it. There is a line he delivers in the 9th episode that people quote for a reason. He says that he is so beautiful, and that melding with the exquisite environment around him enhances his stellar looks, and that he is the pinnacle of beauty. Nobody agreed with him. Nobody was meant to. He was not performing for the room. He was simply saying a true thing as far as he was concerned, out loud, because it had occurred to him. There is a crueler moment that gets less attention, and it is worth including because it stops him being merely absurd. When Pseudo is accused of attacking 3 students from Class C, and the accusation is serious enough that he is facing expulsion, the class is frightened, not just for him. An expulsion costs the whole class, and they are already at 0, and they can all do the arithmetic. And Koenji taunts him about it. Not obliquely, he raises the possibility that Pseudo is about to be thrown out of the school and finds it entertaining, to Pseudo's face, while it is still an open question. Pseudo, who is not a subtle instrument, comes very close to hitting him. The material notes something interesting about that near miss. Ayanokoji, watching, judged that if Pseudo had actually swung, Koenji would have defended himself and returned it, and that Pseudo would not have enjoyed the outcome, which tells you that at least one person in that room understood this early, that the preening was not covering for softness. But hold on to the taunt itself, because it establishes the thing that matters. He is not simply detached. Other people's fear is legible to him, and he finds it mildly amusing. He is not floating above the social world because he cannot see it. He sees it perfectly well. And this is where I want to slow down, because there is a trick this character plays that took me an embarrassingly long time to notice. Insulting him does not work. Not in the sense that he is thick-skinned or that he pretends not to care. Something odder. When people attack him for arrogance, he agrees, enthusiastically. He will elaborate on the point for you. When they attack him for laziness, he agrees. When they attack him for having abandoned them, which is coming, he laughs and offers a transparently false excuse and does not mind at all that nobody believes it. The material puts it precisely. He is completely unaffected by any attack or threat. He laughs it off, or he turns it around on whoever tried. Now, a school like this one runs on exactly 2 levers. It can promise you something you want, or it can threaten to take something away. Every single mechanism in that building, the points, the classes, the promotions, the expulsions, is one of those 2 things wearing a different hat. Both of them need the same ingredient, which is a person who wants something. Threaten Koenji with expulsion, and his family buys the points. He does not worry about money, ever in the entire story, because his family can simply purchase whatever quantity of it he needs. Offer him promotion to Class A and he is not interested. Shame him in front of 40 people and he agrees with you and asks if you would like to hear more about it. There is no lever. The school has built an extraordinarily sophisticated machine for controlling adolescence, and there is one boy in the first year that the machine simply slides off. You can watch the class adapt to this in real time, across the seasons, and the adaptation is quietly sad. Early on they try. Hirata, who is constitutionally incapable of writing anybody off, includes him. Horikita, who is building a machine and needs every part of it, counts him. There are attempts to reason with him, to appeal to self-interest, to point out that his own future is bound up with theirs. None of it lands, and after a while they stop. By the second year, the way Class D handles Rokusuke Koenji is that they plan around the space where he is. He is not in the study groups. He is not in the strategy. When they count their assets, he is not counted. He sits in the room, entirely present, greeting people pleasantly, and he has become a piece of furniture that occasionally says something insulting. And here is the part that turns it from comedy into something with a little sorrow in it. That is exactly what he wanted, and he achieved it by being consistent for 18 months, and it cost him nothing he valued. He is not lonely. That is what makes him unusual in this cast. Everybody else who ends up isolated in this story is suffering from it. Horikita's isolation is a wound she eventually works her way out of. Kushida's is a performance covering something worse. Ayanokoji's is a survival adaptation that starts, very slowly, to come apart as people attach themselves to him regardless. Koenji is alone in a building of 400 people and appears to find it comfortable. There is one exchange that captures the whole arrangement. When Ayanokoji, in the second year, follows him for reasons of his own and gets spotted doing it, Koenji simply asks whether he would like to team up. Just like that, no hostility about being followed, no interest in why, an open invitation. And Ayanokoji declines, and the reason he gives is worth hearing, because it is not an insult. He says he does not want to let Koenji do all the work for him. That is the assessment of the most capable student in the school, offered casually, in passing. Not that Koenji would be a liability, that partnering with him would mean being carried. Which would all be a fine joke, and nothing more than a joke, if he were not also extremely good at things. Let us take the academics first, because they are the easiest to verify and the most quietly damning. There is a point early in the first year where Class D is facing a test that several of them are going to fail, and failing means expulsion, and a solution appears quietly from the back of the room. Somebody has acquired the previous year's version of the exam. The answers circulate through the class. Almost everybody takes them and memorizes them, because almost everybody is frightened. Koenji is one of the very few who does not. He does not take the answers. He does not memorize anything. He sits the exam and he passes it, and he says nothing about having done so. There is no scene where he reveals this. It is simply recorded as a fact in the list of who used the papers and who did not, and his name is not on it. I find that detail quietly extraordinary, and I want to sit on it for a moment. Picture the room. Class D has just been told that anybody who fails will be expelled. These are teenagers who have been cut off from their families, dropped inside a competitive machine none of them fully understand, and informed that a bad result on a piece of paper ends everything. And then a lifeline appears, and it is passed hand to hand around the room in something close to desperation, and almost every person in that class takes it. And one boy looks at the offered answers and does not want them. Not out of principle. There is no scene where he lectures anybody about cheating, and he would not care if there were. He simply did not require them, and taking them would have meant participating in the general panic, and he was not panicking. He sat the exam cold and he passed it, and then he never mentioned it, and the story never has anybody praise him for it. It is recorded the way you would record the weather. And Honami Ichinose, who leads Class B and who is one of the most perceptive people in the year, names him. When she is assessing Class D, working out which of these supposedly defective students actually represents a threat, she picks out a small number of names to watch, and Rokusuke Koenji is among them. She thinks he could be dangerous even to the upper classes. The thing that limits him, in her reading and in the schools, is not his ceiling. It is his character. He is capped by disposition, not by capacity. There is a comparison worth making here, because this school contains two students who deliberately hide what they can do, and they are almost never discussed together. Ayanokoji conceals his ability out of fear. Not fear as most people experience it, but something structurally identical. He understands that being noticed is the mechanism by which he gets found and taken back, and so he arranges at real and continuous cost to be unremarkable. He scores exactly 50. He sits at the back. He hands away every victory he wins. Concealment is his survival, and he works at it every single day. Koenji conceals nothing at all. That is the difference, and it took me a long time to see it. He is not hiding. He is never hidden. He crossed a forest through the treetops in front of witnesses. He blocks punches in public. He wins races by absurd margins with the whole school watching. Anybody paying attention could assemble the picture, and one or two of them do. He simply cannot be bothered to demonstrate it on demand, which is a completely different thing, and which reads identically from the outside. So you have two boys in the same class, both operating far below their capacity, and the school's assessment of them is nearly the same. But one of them is running from something, and one of them is not running at all. And the one who is not running is, on the evidence, the happier person by an enormous margin. Then there is the body, and here the anime and the novels tell noticeably different stories, so let us keep them apart. What the anime shows you is this. He is athletic in a way that is obvious on sight, and during the island exam, which we will come to properly, he crosses a forest by going through the trees. Not around them, not along the path with everybody else. He jumps from tree to tree acrobatically, and he does it fast enough that he outpaces the other students traveling with him, including Ayanokoji, until he is simply gone from sight. Nobody in that class can do that. Nobody in that class knew he could do that. What the novels add, and I want to flag clearly that this is the novels rather than the screen, is considerably more. that he is the fastest swimmer in his class. With a recorded speed, the material explicitly compares to world-class swimming. That when Pseudo, who is the best athlete in the year and who is not holding back, threw a full-force punch at him, Koenji stopped it with an open palm. Ayanokoji watched that happen and confirmed Pseudo was trying. And the same source adds something about his mind that is harder to laugh off. During the cruise ship exam, a puzzle designed to take days and to defeat entire coordinated groups, Koenji identified the answer in under a day, apparently without effort, and then did nothing with it. And in the novels, there is a moment where Ayanokoji, at the height of his concealment, when literally nobody in the school has worked out who he is, and an entire class has rejected the idea as absurd, grips Koenji by the arm. That is all, one grip. And from it, Koenji knows. He identifies him as the person operating Class D from behind the scenes, immediately, from a single piece of physical contact, at a point in the story when the most dangerous minds in that building are still years away from the same conclusion. So here is the shape of the person we have. Somebody with real academic ability who declines to demonstrate it. Somebody with physical ability that startles the strongest people in his year on the rare occasions it becomes visible. Somebody perceptive enough to identify the story's greatest secret from a touch on the arm. And somebody who has taken all of that, looked carefully at a school offering the most valuable prize in the country to whoever performs best, and decided he would rather not. The school wrote a diagnosis for this on his first day: defective trait, inability to work with others. I have never been sure they got it right. It is not that he cannot work with others. It is that he has looked at the entire arrangement, the classes, the points, the exams, the promise of a guaranteed future, and concluded that none of it is worth the inconvenience. And in a school where every single other student is defined by the thing they are chasing, that makes him something the institution genuinely has no category for. They are about to find that out, because in a few weeks the whole first year is going to be put on a boat and left on an island, and they are going to discover exactly how far Rokusuke Koenji is willing to go in order to be left alone. The exam itself is simple enough to state. The class is put ashore with limited resources and a great deal to lose, and everything from that point is about cooperation, endurance, and holding a group together, while other classes try to pull it apart. And the first surprising thing Koenji does is volunteer. Hirata, who is the closest thing Class D has to a decent human being, proposes an exploration of the island and asks who will go. And Rokusuke Koenji, who has to this point declined to participate in absolutely anything, puts himself forward. For about 10 minutes, it looks like a turning point. It looks like the story is going to do the ordinary thing, where the difficult classmate discovers a sense of belonging under pressure, and everybody learns something. Then they enter the forest, and he leaves the ground. He goes up into the trees and starts moving through them, jumping from one to the next, and he does it with a speed and a physical assurance that has no business belonging to a boy who spends his afternoons complimenting mirrors. He outpaces the group. He outpaces Ayanokoji specifically, which should be underlined since Ayanokoji is a person who can evade a black belt without changing expression. He outpaces Irie, and then he is simply gone out of sight into a forest none of them have mapped. And he keeps going, past the edge of the exploration, down to the water. And he swims out to a ship. That is the whole plan. That was always the plan. He volunteered for the exploration party because it was the only sanctioned way to get far enough from his classmates that nobody could stop him, and then he used it to remove himself from the examination entirely. Withdrawing costs Class D 30 points. I want to be careful to convey what 30 points meant to that particular class at that particular moment. This is the class that lost its entire monthly allowance in the first month. They are, in a very real sense, broke. They are attempting the first climb any Class D has ever made in the history of this school, and one of their own has just, on the first significant test of that attempt, walked to the sea and swum away from them and taken 30 points with him. And here is the detail that makes it art rather than just unpleasantness. That night, while his classmates are still on the island, cold, short of supplies, and extremely angry, Koenji is elsewhere, comfortable, and what he does with his evening is admire the moon. The story cuts to it deliberately. His class is suffering. He thinks the moon looks beautiful and says so. When they come back and they come back victorious, which is its own small joke, he greets them warmly. He congratulates them. He tells them how well they did. Pseudo, understandably, wants to have a conversation about the swimming. And Koenji laughs at him and explains that he had been unwell and needed to recover and so had removed himself for his health. The material notes dryly that the class were not convinced. He offers no better excuse. He does not need one. He knows perfectly well that they know, and that knowing changes nothing, and that in a week they will still be sitting in the same room as him, and there will be nothing any of them can do about it. He shows no remorse in the act or afterwards, not suppressed remorse, none. And the thing that keeps this from being simply the story of an unpleasant boy is that on the arithmetic he was right. It cost him nothing. There was no consequence. The class absorbed the loss and eventually climbed anyway, and Koenji continued to sit at the back being magnificent at himself. The school's punishment mechanisms are collective, and a person who does not care about the collective is structurally immune to them. There is a version of this scene that the story could easily have written and deliberately did not, and I think the choice is the whole point. The obvious version is that Koenji swims away, the class fails, and he is confronted with the damage. He learns, he apologizes or at least stops. The group closes around him and he discovers, grudgingly, that he needed them. That is the standard shape, and it is what almost every school story does with a character like this. It is what happens to Sudo, who learns to study. It is what happens to Horikita, who learns to ask. It is what happens, eventually, to Ryuan and to Kushida and to nearly everyone else in this series, because that is what these stories are for. It does not happen to Koenji, not in this exam, not in the next one, not in 2 years of them. He deserts and the class survives without him, and he comes back and nothing has changed. There is no reckoning scene. There is no quiet moment 2 episodes later where you learn he was watching from the ship and worrying. He was not worrying. He was looking at the moon. The story keeps offering him the exit ramp that every other character takes, and he keeps driving past it, and after a while you realize the offer is the joke. He is not on a redemption arc that is running slowly. He is not on one at all. Now, if you want to know what he could have been, there is one piece of evidence, and it comes from the novels rather than the screen, so take it as that. He had a route to Class A. Not a fantasy, a working commercial scheme. He arranged for third-year students to hand over their private points to him, in exchange for his family reimbursing them in actual money after they graduated. He is the heir to a company. His name on that promise was good, and enough of them believed it that the material says many agreed. Think about what that is. Every other student in that school is trying to earn points inside a closed system where points are desperately scarce. Koenji opened a door in the wall and connected the school's internal currency to his family's real one, which is effectively infinite by comparison. He found the exploit, and it was working. It was Nagumo who stopped it. The student council president noticed, watched him, worked out what he was doing, and moved to change the school's rules to make it impossible. So the picture we now have is of somebody who not only could compete, but had already quietly built the most elegant path to victory anyone in the year came up with, and who was on course to walk it, and who lost that path only because the most powerful student in the school personally intervened. And when it collapsed, he did not appear to mind. Which brings us to his second year, and to the point where the mask starts slipping in front of witnesses. There is a small moment during a task on a hill. Ayanokoji has gone there expecting to be alone and finds Koenji already present. What they end up doing is a tug of war, 1 against 1. Ayanokoji's intention is to lose. He does not need the points, and there is a strategic reason for Koenji to have them, so his plan is to apply a little pressure and then let go. He cannot do it. Because Koenji matches him. Whatever force Ayanokoji applies, Koenji applies exactly the same, so the rope does not move, so there is no way to make the loss look natural. Ayanokoji increases the pressure to see what happens. Koenji increases with him perfectly, still holding the rope exactly where it was. And Ayanokoji, who has spent his life being quietly stronger than everyone in the room, concludes in that moment that Koenji is probably stronger than Sudo, and stronger than Albert, the 2 most physically formidable students in the year. Eventually, Ayanokoji simply releases and lets him win. And Koenji tells him, without any particular emphasis, that he is the efficient type. He knew the entire time what Ayanokoji was doing, and why, and rather than expose it or object to it, he simply held the rope in place and made it impossible, and then told him he had noticed. It is one of the very few times anyone catches Ayanokoji mid-manipulation and lets him know, and it is done with the mild good humor of a man declining a drink. That moment deserves a little more, because of who it happens to. Ayanokoji has spent 2 years being the person who reads the room while the room fails to read him. That is his entire method. He arranges outcomes, hands away the credit, and walks off before anybody works out that an outcome was arranged. Teachers suspect it. Class leaders build campaigns around suspecting it. Almost nobody ever catches him in the act, and the handful who do have to work extraordinarily hard to get there. And on a hill, during a task neither of them cares about, holding a rope, Rokusuke Koenji catches him instantly and does nothing about it. He does not expose him, he does not use it, he does not store it away as leverage, which is what literally every other person in this story would have done and what several of them spend entire arcs attempting. He just makes the manipulation impossible by matching him pound for pound, tells him he is the efficient type, and lets it go. It is the single most Koenji thing in the series. He is handed the secret half the school is hunting for, and his response is that it would be too much bother to do anything with it. Shortly afterward there is a swimming task, and Koenji arrives before people who were moving quickly and wins by a large margin, in front of everybody. And a first-year girl asks Ayanokoji what exactly is wrong with him, why he is like this, what he is. And Ayanokoji's answer, in full, is that she should ignore him, because he is a superhuman. That is the assessment of the most capable person in the school, given privately, with no audience to perform for. Elsewhere, Sakayanagi and Ayanokoji discuss him too, and the word they use is prodigy. The two sharpest minds of that year, who agree on almost nothing, both quietly rate Rokusuke Koenji. I want to hold those two words next to each other for a moment, because of who is saying them. Sakayanagi is a girl whose entire worldview is that ability is innate and cannot be manufactured, who spent 8 years hunting for one opponent worth the trouble, and who considers essentially everybody else in her year beneath serious consideration. She does not hand out the word prodigy. It is very close to the highest thing she is capable of saying about another human being. And Ayanokoji does not use superlatives at all. He describes the strongest fighters in the school in terms of what he would need to do about them. He has assessed Ryuen Hosen, Manabu Horikita, and grown adults sent to remove him, and none of them get a word like that. He says of Koenji flatly to a girl who asked a simple question that he is a superhuman and then changes the subject. Neither of them is trying to flatter him, neither of them is speaking to him. They are describing, privately to third parties, a boy who is at that moment probably lying on a beach somewhere admiring himself. And the assessment nobody in the school offers in 2 full years is that he is a fool. Plenty of people call him useless. That is a different word and it means a different thing, and every single person who uses it knows the difference. So we come to the last thing, which is the strangest and the best. In his second year, the school announces its largest examination yet, 2 weeks, the entire school, all 3 years at once, and it is the kind of exam that cannot be avoided by being rich or bored or above it all. Koenji's first response to this news is not to plan, it is to look for the door. He follows Chabashira after the briefing and asks her a very specific question: what happens, exactly, to a student who simply cannot participate on the first day? And she tells him that student is expelled. There it is, the one thing his family's money cannot buy him out of, and he checked immediately before doing anything else. His instinct was not to compete, it was to leave, and the door was locked. So Rokusuke Koenji, unable to escape, does something nobody expects. He goes to Suzune Horikita, the representative of his class, and he proposes a deal. The terms are this: if he performs in this examination, then he is to be left entirely alone, to do whatever he wishes until graduation. And she agrees. It is worth asking why she would, because on the face of it she is handing away a classmate permanently, and Suzune Horikita is not careless with her class. But look at it from her chair. She has spent 1.5 years with a student who contributes nothing, who cannot be persuaded, threatened, shamed, or bought, and who has already cost the class points once by simply leaving. Every plan she makes has to be made around him. He is not an asset she is failing to use. He is a permanent hole in the middle of her roster that she has no tool to fill. And here he is offering to perform, once, properly, in the largest examination the school has ever run. She's not giving something away. She's converting a dead asset into a single, enormous, guaranteed contribution at the cost of formalizing a state of affairs that already existed. He was never going to help her anyway. Now at least she gets one payment for it. That is the trade, and it is a good one for both of them, which is why it happens. It is also, quietly, the first negotiation Rokusuke Koenji has ever entered into with another student as an equal, and he opens it by naming his price and does not move off it. Look carefully at what has just happened, because it is the hinge of his whole character. He is not entering the biggest contest of the school year to win it. Winning is not the objective. Winning is the price he has agreed to pay. He is buying something with it, and what he is buying is permanent, negotiated, contractual permission to never participate in anything ever again. He is going to do the work once, so that he never has to do any of it again. And then he goes and does it. Alone, no group, no allies, no arrangement with anybody. In the early standings he is already fourth, behind only Nagumo and Nagumo's second, both of whom are third years operating with substantial support. He climbs. Ayano tracking the board, works out that catching him would require something like 40 points a day, and quietly concludes it is not happening. Kiryuin, a third year, warns that Nagumo will not simply allow a second year to sit at the top, and that one of them is going to fall. Nagumo's own people are eventually put on him. And he wins. 327 points, 2 clear of Miyabi Nagumo, the student council president, who had an entire year of students working as a machine on his behalf, and who considered it self-evident that no first or second year had any right to be near the top 3. Beaten by 2 points, by one boy traveling on his own, who had spent the first day of the exam trying to find out how to leave. And Suzune Horikita, who made a deal, has to honor it. So the final state of Rokusuke Koenji, at the point where the animated story sets him down, is this. He is now formally free. He has a standing agreement with his own class representative that he may do exactly as he pleases for the rest of his time at that school, and he earned it by beating everybody. He won the thing that every student in that building is desperate for, and he spent the prize on being left alone. I want to dwell on the manner of that victory, because it is the part that reframes everything before it. He did it alone. That examination ran for 2 weeks, and it rewarded organization above almost anything else. The people at the top had groups. They had allies feeding them, people scouting ahead, arrangements with other classes, transceivers, standing instructions. Nagumo in particular was running something closer to an administration than a team. Koenji had none of that. He was invited to group up and declined. He formed no alliances. He negotiated with nobody except once his own class representative, and that negotiation was about being left alone afterwards. For a fortnight he simply walked around an island by himself doing tasks, and when the numbers were read out, he had beaten every organized structure in the school. And he did it while everyone was watching him. He was not hiding in the middle of the field. He was visible at the top of the board for days, with the most powerful student in the school aware of him, actively resenting him, and eventually directing third years to interfere with him. It still was not enough. Which raises a question the story never answers and I think is deliberately left open. If a boy who does not care, working alone, with no preparation and no allies and no particular interest in the outcome, can beat the entire machinery of the school's most capable political operator by 2 points, what exactly could he have done if he had wanted something? Nobody in the story asks him. I suspect if they did he would decline to answer, at length, courteously. There is a phrase that gets used about him more than once by people who cannot stand him. Kiriyama, dismissing a third-year girl named Kiryuin, says she is useless and similar to Koenji. And when Ayano actually talks to Kiryuin, he finds the comparison fair because she also acts purely in her own interest and only when it happens to suit her. The school has a category for this after all. The category is useless, and the 2 students they file under it are, on the evidence, among the most capable people in the building, and both of them are perfectly aware of that, and neither of them is bothered. I will leave you with the one moment that does not fit, because I think a story is better with a loose thread. It happens in the novels, quietly, with almost nobody watching. Hirata knocks a girl to the ground carelessly and does not apologize, and Koenji, who has never in his life expressed concern for another human being, is annoyed by this. He tells Hirata that he is an irritating sight and should remove himself from view. Hirata reaches for his collar and Koenji stops his arm without effort. And then he picks the girl up off the ground and takes her back to the dormitories and waits until he has seen her safely into the lift. Nobody asks him to, nobody sees except Ayano who was following. There is no advantage in it. The source is unusually blunt about this and says plainly that it is unknown why he helped her because he had nothing whatsoever to gain. And when Ayano asks him about the argument, Koenji does not mention the girl at all. He says only that Hirata's presence was like a fly and irritating. That is where I would leave him, not with the victory and not with the moon. Because the school looked at Rokusuke Koenji on his first day and wrote down that his defect was an inability to work with others, and everything he did afterwards appeared to confirm it. He deserted them. He mocked them. He took their points and admired the sky. And then once, when nobody was keeping score and there was nothing at all to be won, he quietly picked somebody up off the floor and made sure she got home, and then declined to explain himself. When he was asked what he hoped for from his second year, the answer he gave was recorded in his own words. He said he had no aspirations of that sort, that he simply wanted to be himself and to go on spending his days in freedom. I have thought about that word a good deal, because everybody in this story is chasing some version of it, and he is the only one who uses it plainly. Ayanokoji says he came to this school for freedom, and what he means is escape, somewhere his father cannot reach him. That is not freedom. It is a shorter leash in a nicer garden, and he knows it, and he tells the director as much when he says he expects to be taken back eventually. Horikita wants Class A, which she believes will free her from her brother's shadow. It does not and cannot, because the shadow was never in the rankings. Nagumo wants to rebuild the school into a true meritocracy, which he describes as opening a door. What he actually builds is a court with himself at the center, and every person he frees is freed on his terms and can be unfreed at his convenience. Ichinose wants her class safe, which chains her to 40 people. Every one of them has defined freedom as a destination on the other side of enormous effort, and every one of them is wrong in a slightly different way, and the story is fairly brutal about it. And then there is a boy who was told on his first day that his defect is an inability to work with others, who has never once contested the diagnosis, and who arrives at the end of the animated story having negotiated a formal agreement that nobody may ask anything of him ever again. He did not find freedom at the end of a climb. He started with it, protected it against every attempt to take it from him, and when the school finally cornered him and made escape impossible, he simply paid the toll in one enormous installment and went back to what he was doing. He is not a good person. I want to be clear about that, because it would be easy to let the elegance of it wash the rest away. He abandoned his class when they were struggling and admired the moon while they suffered for it. He taunted a frightened boy about being expelled. He has, as far as we can see, never once put himself out for another human being. Except once, off-screen, for a girl he had no reason to help, whom he carried home and watched safely into a lift, and then declined to explain. That is the whole of him, and the story never resolves it, and I do not think it wants to. A young man who could have had anything this school offers and found none of it worth the walk, who is described by the two sharpest people in his year as a prodigy and a superhuman, and by everyone else as useless, and who would agree cheerfully with all four of them. Everybody else in that school is running towards something. He is the only one already there. Sleep well.